Hey, it's Kevin DeWitch here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this video, we're going to check out the Precision Channel Strip from UAD. Firstly, if you're new to my channel and to my videos and you like what you see, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos as they come out. So the Precision Channel Strip from UAD, obviously as the name states, it is a channel strip and it is supposed to be precise. It's a very clean channel strip that UAD have had out for a long time, and I've seen a lot of people use it and claim that it's fantastic and use it all the time, and it does what you would think it would do. It is a channel strip. Now, as for channel strips as they go, this one is more limited in what it can provide. A lot of channel strips will provide lots of functionality. This one provides basically an EQ and a compressor, but its claim is that it is very clean and is going to give you very detailed and accurate results that you want to get out of it. And it does exactly that. Okay, it doesn't have any fancy graphic interfaces, etc. So it really does force you to use your ears, because it is lots of dials and things like that where you really need to listen to the results, which is a great thing because a lot of people will mix with their eyes, which is not always bad, but your ears really need to be telling you what you want to do, and this plugin will allow you to do that. So probably easier if I just show you all about it. So let's get into it and check it out. Okay, so I've just got a song here. We'll just play with it on a full song. And here we have the plugin. So this is a stereo version. So there is a mono version as well if you're applying this on a mono instrument. So we are broken up into a couple of sections here. We've got our EQ section, which is all of this. We've got our dynamic section in here. And we've got some output controls here and an on-off switch. So the EQ section is supposed to be a very clean EQ. It doesn't characterize anything. It doesn't emulate anything. It is a very, very clean EQ. So this could be very handy if you just want to EQ something without it imparting any sort of distortion or any vintage characteristics. Probably something very useful if you are doing mastering, as generally you want to do clean things on mastering. You don't want to impart any extra distortion. There are cases you do, but not all the time. Again, the dynamics is very similar. Again, very low distortion, very precise, and so it's supposed to give us a very clean dynamics processing. Again, probably really good for mastering. They don't necessarily stipulate that it is for mastering, but I guess being such a clean process, then it could be quite useful for that. And then we have separate output controls for the EQ and the dynamics. So that'll be interesting to see how they play out with each other, because we can control each one independently, up or down, and we can even turn each one individually off. So let's start over with the EQ. We've got some very basic settings here. So we've broken up into different parts. We've got our low frequency 1, low frequency 2, mid frequencies, high frequency 1, high frequency 2. So we can turn them individually on or off by clicking on the buttons. We can obviously change our value here. So in regard here, so we can change the setting to how we want. So fully over this side, we end up with a low shelf. And then we go into a bell parametric style here. And depending on the value, depends on how narrow or wide that bell shape is. And then if we go all fully over to the other side, and then we turn into a high pass filter. So that setting is exactly the same on both of these low frequencies. And then on the opposite end of the scale with the high frequency ones, we get a very similar approach, except instead of a low shelf, we have a high shelf. Then again, we go into a parametric style. And if we go fully to the other side, we get a low pass filter. And they're both identical on both of those. And in the mid frequency here, we obviously don't have a shelf or a high pass or low pass. And we are purely talking about a parametric here, where we're adjusting our width of our Q for that bell shape setting there. Next control is our frequency. Again, across the board, they're all the same. They're all identical. So they all have the power to go from 20 Hertz up to 20K. So you can mix and match these to whatever you want. You don't need to do it in a logical order if you don't want to. And then we have our gain control, which is we can go into a negative. So that's where we want to do a cut. Or we can go into a positive where we're doing a boost. Now, the trick with this one is this, sometimes this can be a little bit difficult to use in this generation because we're so used to looking at nice graphs where we can see a representation of what we're doing. So you need to actually sort of use your ears more and maybe visually in your head imagine what you're doing, because you can't see the shape of the EQ that you're applying. It's all about knowing what you're putting on and imagining what you're doing and just listening to it. So, you can see what frequencies you're attacking by these values, but a lot of people are used to looking at the graphs now where you clearly see the lines and the waveforms and things like that and how much you're boosting and all that sort of stuff. So over here on this side, we can turn an entire section on or off. And we can also turn the entire plugin on or off. And as I said, you've got a volume control where you can boost or reduce or just leave it at 0. So right now I'm going to turn the dynamics off and we're going to just concentrate on the EQ. I'm just going to play with some settings because I've explained them. So let's just play around and have a listen to what it does. So at 32, we've got a very narrow Q. So we say we're boosting a very specific frequency at that level. When I wind it down to here, you'll hear a bigger variance in the sound. And that's because the Q is now a lot wider and we're impacting this boost on a lot of frequencies. right, so that's the EQ. Very clean, very nice sounding, very functional. Again, it is just another EQ, so do you need another EQ? That's up to you. Depends what you want to get out of it and what you want to do with it. But, you know, it's a very functional EQ. You've got enough bands here to be able to do pretty much anything you want on each track. So let's check out the dynamics section here. So we've got our general basic settings. So we obviously need to turn it on. We have our attack, we have our release, we have our ratio, our threshold. Our in and out here is showing our meters. So in is obviously going to be showing the signal before it goes into the compressor, and out is going to show us what it's coming out of the compressor, what level. We've got an auto gain control here, which is going to try and level match as we apply compression. And we've got a gain reduction meter here, which should show us how much we're reducing our gain by. We can then obviously alter with this button here, whether it's before the EQ or after, but we need to turn the EQ on to be able to do that. So in the default state with this button off, the signal goes through the EQ first, and then after it's gone through the EQ, it then goes into the dynamics section and then out of the plugin. If we switch this on, then we reverse the plan and we actually go through the dynamics section first and then into the EQ and out. Okay, so let's turn the EQ off and let's just have a look at the dynamics and play with that a little bit. Again, I'm just doing it on the entire song. We'll use this as sort of a pseudo mastering session and keep things fairly subtle. So we've already got some reduction happening here because the level is quite high. If I raise the threshold, we're getting quite a lot of reduction now. Set to 4 to 1. You can speed up the attack and make it sound really unnatural and squished. We can slow it down. We can slow the release down as well. It's really slow. Just speed the attack up for the minute. So you're really going to have to lose your ears, but you can look at this gain reduction control here to see what the compressor is doing. So obviously, the faster the attack, the faster you should see this shoot down to grab those peaks. And the faster the release, you should see it go back up quicker. So if you set it to a slow value, you should see it slowly creep back up, or it may never creep back up at all because it may continue to compress and never actually get to be able to release. So we get a nice sort of pumping there, but we could slow it down and then you'll see it never really lets go. And you got your ratio that's obviously doing nothing. You'd be quite subtle if you were mastering, but you could go for a brick wall sort of limiter type effect. So going up to infinity, you basically turn this compressor into a limiter, because a limiter is basically a compressor with a extremely high ratio. So that's an extreme amount of compression. So if we turn our EQ on and let's, for instance, just have a bit of a play with, let's set a high pass filter. I'm just going to do something very obvious here. And we're going to set that to, say, about 100. So we're going to filter out a lot of the kick. So if we turn the dynamics off for a minute. We don't need to actually control that knob at all. So you hear the bass and the kick is being stripped out. So if we turn our dynamics back on, and then what I'll do is turn the EQ off for a second. Let's just wind this back down a bit. Okay, so we've got a fair amount of gain reduction. Now remember, the EQ is being fed first, the signal through the EQ, then into the dynamics. So if I turn the EQ on, the amount of compression that happens should change because we are taking out a lot of the low end. You can see the amount of compression that's happening. Now, with the audio going through the EQ first, then into the dynamics, when I turn this EQ on, we should see the amount of gain reduction that's happening reduced because we basically wiped out all of this low end. So the compressor doesn't need to deal with this low end now, so it should be changed. So you can see the compressors drop back quite a bit because all that low end's been removed. Now, if we switch it around, that benefit of having no low end go into the dynamics will be removed because the dynamics will be first, which means that it will be hearing this low end, compressing it, and then the EQ will be removing it. So you can see why the placement can be critical to what you want to do. So in this regard here, if you're filtering out low end, it's usually advisable to have the EQ before the compressor because you don't want the compressor to compress something that you're going to remove. So if I switch this, you'll suddenly see it's compressing a lot more again because now it's compressing the low end. Which also means if the low end is very loud, the compressor is going to compress the high end a lot more because it has to pull down for that low end. So if it's something you're going to filter out, it's always good to have the EQ before it. Now, what if it was the other way? What if we wanted to actually have a high shelf and boost some signal? So if we go back to our standard here, and so if we turn the EQ off and we're compressing, we're about there, turn the EQ on, the compressor is now having to deal with this top end as well. And it's compressing based on this top end. Now, if we were to switch this around, then what happens is the dynamics does not hear this extra top end. So it compresses the signal based on its original without this. And then after we come out of the compressor, then we do a bit of a boost with a shelf. So this can be handy to have if you want to add a little bit of sort of top end that may be being lost with your compressor, but you need the compressor to control your signal, but it's losing some of your top end, then you might switch this around and put the dynamics first so that it does its compression, maybe dulls your signal down a bit, and then you then go into an EQ and you do a bit of a boost. Obviously, this is quite extreme, but you do a bit of a boost of a shelf or something like that to add that brightness back to your signal. Whereas if you do the brightness before going into the dynamics, then the compressor is basically having to deal with this extra high end, and it's going to squash your signal more than you want and possibly take a lot of that benefit that you've added there out by dulling it down again. So let's compare the two. So that's with the dynamics having to affect that. And that's with it's not. So here I'm going extreme. I've brought it down, my shelf down to 1K. So we've got quite a lot of frequencies involved now, and you can hear the difference. So with the EQ first, there's a lot more compression going on because it's having to hear this. Then when I switch it around, there's not as much compression happening because it's compressing the original signal only, and then we're adding this boost. So that could be the benefit of doing this before or after. So that's a judgment call on what function you're doing with the EQ and the compressor and what you're trying to get out of it, but it's something handy to know. Okay, so now what happens with this volume control here? I'm not 100% sure why you'd have two independent controls, but I guess what I could see happening here is if we have our EQ first and then we go into a compressor, if we feel our signal's a bit weak as we come out of the EQ, so I guess it's for gain staging purposes between each of these sections. So if we looked at these as independent plugins, what we might want to do is say, if we do a lot of cuts in our EQ, we're going to reduce our volume of our signal. So we might then say, okay, well, I'm going to boost that because I want to have the signal stay level. I still want it to hit this compressor at a certain level here. So for instance, if we bypass the EQ, we turn the dynamics on. Okay, so we're hitting gain reduction there. Now if I turn the EQ on, because we're doing so many cuts here, we've suddenly dropped how the compressor is reacting because it's getting a very weak signal now. So to compensate for that, you could boost your EQ so that you are getting a similar amount of compression happening whether the EQ is on or off. So you can see here, our compressor is reacting pretty much the same. But we've had to boost the EQ quite a bit to do that because of our massive cuts here. So that can be the benefit with that. Now, and I guess they've got the independent control here is similar as if you want to go the other way. If you've got your dynamics first, you might want to feed into your equalizer at the same level. But yeah, I don't really get that so much. And with auto gain on, I guess this control is probably not as valuable. But if you are like me and maybe you don't always trust the auto gain and you don't like it, then I guess what you're going to do is you turn your auto gain off. You basically want a level match so that you can compare the two and get a true representation of what that compressor is doing because you're not hearing a level difference. So I guess that's where that
volume control comes in handy, and the EQ one, as I said there, again, is for the same thing. It can be for feeding into the dynamics, but it can also be just for the sake of, even if you weren't using the dynamics, just, again, level matching your plugins so that you can hear the real difference between what you're doing. So there you go. That's all the controls there. It's actually quite a nice plugin. Will I use it a lot? Maybe not, but I probably might tend to think about using this on a mastering session. Probably wouldn't gravitate to it too much on a mixing session because I've got so many other plugins. But if this is all you had, then, you know, absolutely, this is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with this at all. And you've got this great control here with the feed in and the volume control and everything else.
So there you go. There is the Precision Channel Strip from UAD. It's a great sounding plugin, a very useful plugin, but to be honest with you, I've had it for a while and it really doesn't inspire me to use it. I'm not sure why. It's just something I just don't grab and use every day because I just have other plugins that do what I want, and I'm not sure why. There's actually nothing wrong with it. It's just something about it just doesn't grab me to go and use it. And it could be something that I need to force myself to use a bit more and get used to it and learn a bit more about it and really get to know it. But sometimes plugins just don't grab you, and they don't want, you know, they don't force you to want to use them all the time and to get to know them. And this just happens to be one of those plugins for me. Now, if you have this plugin or you've tried this plugin, let me know in the comments your opinion of it. Is it something that you use all the time? And if so, why? Why do you use it? What about it grabs you to use it every day? And if you don't, again, tell me why you don't use it either. You know, you like me, it just doesn't inspire you to use it, or is there something you don't like about it? So as with some of the other videos recently, this is again one of my older videos that was on my website, didn't make it to YouTube. So hopefully the quality was okay. Hopefully I wasn't too boring in it. And if you did like the video, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos as they come out. Hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.